Welcome to another episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Allen, and with me today is Kalie Souknary. She is a podcaster, content manager, and apartment locator based out of Austin, Texas. Kalie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. How are you, Jake?
I'm doing great. Stoked to be here. Stoked to be talking to you.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
Yeah, why don't you walk us through a little quick, or through a little bit real quick, kind of like what you do, like what is an apartment locator specifically for those who may not know?
So, I work for Smart City Locating in Austin. They're based in Dallas, but they have branches everywhere. Our offices are literally everywhere around the US. So, it's really nice because if I chose to, go somewhere on a whim, I pretty much could. But I love Austin so much. So, what I do here is I help people find a place that they'll really love living in that's within their budget. And I basically provide, I get to know them. I like to know what people like to do outside of work and also what they do for work and what works best for them as far as, do you like to work from home or do you go into the office? Just so I can get an idea of their commute or lack thereof. And then I search all over town for the best deals and I provide them with a list of apartments, usually around 6 to 8 choices to start with. And we narrow it down to their top three, and those are the ones we take a tour to. Once we tour them and they've decided, hey, I really love this one place. It's a great part of town. I really love the amount of space. It's great for me and my dog. Then I'm like, okay, awesome. Let's go ahead and, apply. And basically, after they apply, I guide them through their move in process. We have a free concierge service at Smart City as well. So everything from setting up your electricity to your internet is it's like we, help with the whole thing, which is so amazing, especially for people who are moving out of state, which is very common in Austin now, as you know. So it's basically a one-stop shop for anyone who's moving and really doesn't understand the process very well. And I just made my first sale last week, so I'm very
Let's
excited and I'm
go.
loving it so
Congratulations.
far. Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations. How did you get your start um, being an apartment locator? Like, how did you step into that role? What led you to
So
that?
this is a funny story because it's so long and I feel like when I think about it later, I'm like, how can I condense this story? But it deserves to know, how I got here because it's so we always like to think that our careers will be linear and that's never the case.
Totally.
So in college, I worked for Sanctuary Lofts in San Marcos, Texas. I was going to Texas State at the time. I was a community assistant. So basically, it was my job to sign people's leases and take them on tours. And I loved it. I had a great boss, and that makes a huge difference having a great boss. I worked there all throughout college. And then I graduated and moved on to Colorado Springs to be a full time leasing agent for a different student property management company. I was there for about 6 months before being promoted to leasing manager at the old housing property management company. So I moved up to leasing manager, moved out to Oregon, and don't get me wrong, Oregon is absolutely beautiful, but I was 2,000 miles away from anyone I knew. It was very hard to make friends in a college town as an adult. And that's when I realized I also just hate being behind a screen dealing with spreadsheets all day. And I was like, I'm too young to feel this old.
Mm,
So I was 23 at
yeah.
the time. And that's when I decided, I got my degree in communication and I've always been a creative. So I was like, maybe I should just move back home for a year, figure out what I want to do. And then when I figure that out, I can move back out to Colorado or something. So I moved back to Texas to start as a generalist in marketing. And soon I realized that my copywriting was highly appreciated and highly valued. So I moved up at the company there after 2 years. It was a long 2 years of putting in the work and being like, hey, I really want a promotion, and I wasn't getting it. And so when I finally did get it, it was just this amazing thing. I was about to turn 26 years old. I was launching a podcast with one of my best friends, and I was just really excited about life. you know, March 2020 happened, the world shut down, we went fully remote, and I was almost immediately laid off. I was laid off from the agency job, and I was at the time contracting with another small agency in Austin as a copywriter. I was laid off at that one too within a week. So I lost both of my, full time job and my part time job, and I was just lost, to be honest with you. Um, I really thought that I would get a job. I would get another full-time job that I loved within 3 months. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be laid off for long. I'm super qualified. I'm friendly. Someone's going to hire me. God humbled me so quick, so quick. I spent 6 months after that looking for a job. I was offered one job that I just didn't see as a good fit. It was for a healthcare company, and I just never saw myself in the healthcare world. So I turned it down because I thought that something better would come along. I was wrong. I About 3 months later, I got a different job offer at a company that someone referred me to. I ended up absolutely hating that job. And after 3 months, we came to a mutual agreement that it wasn't working out. So after that, I was very turned off by corporate culture and just really tired of marketing in general. And I was tired of selling things that I didn't use or didn't believe in. So I decided, you know what? I'm always on the lake. I'm always at rowing dock. So I might as well, work here. It's $15 an hour. It's outside. It's around great people. Why not? I applied there. I got the job within 2 days and I started working at rowing dock. Um, and I was still applying for marketing jobs at the time. Luckily, I still had a freelance job with the nonprofit I'll tell you about. But um, so I was freelance marketing and working at Rowing Dock, and it was just some of the most amazing days of my life. I was outside every day helping people get on the water and discover their love for the lake. And we would get out of towners, we would get out of staters, and we would get out of the country people who just are drawn to Austin. And that's what I loved. So sometime in between there, I realized I still love selling property. I absolutely love selling property. And the thing about selling property is that it sells itself. It's about the relationships that you're building. And I'm a huge relationship builder. As you mentioned, I'm a podcaster. So my podcast is called Glass Bridges. And what it's the foundational topic was about is building better connections with people through transparent and open communication and really using vulnerability as a power, not a weakness. And so that's why I started that podcast. And so relationship building is huge to me. And then I decided, maybe I should apply at Smart City. And the thing about Smart City is I had an offer to work here 3 years ago. I was still in marketing, I was growing my career, and I was scared to jump into something different because this is a 100% commission job. So if you want it, you have to grind or you have to have a savings or something. So it's just scary to jump into something that you don't know will work out. So at the time I turned it down, but when I applied this time, they asked me, what makes this time different versus the last time we offered you a job? And I said, I'm not scared anymore. I've been working part-time jobs for the past 9 months. I'm not scared. I've managed to make ends meet. God has shown me that He's providing for me. And based off the countless number of jobs that have either never called me or ghosted me, it just made sense that a door was closing and that another opportunity was presenting itself. And that's how I ended up here.
Wow, that's incredible. There's so much to unpack there.
Yes,
Um,
there is.
I love that. I love what you just said at the end about how like you're not scared anymore, and
Yep.
how I think it's just so crazy how like you said, God humbles us, and
Yes.
how just like how that works, and how we think we have it all figured out, and we get shown so quickly that we don't know anything. And so,
Yes.
but I think that the biggest takeaway I would say from everything you just said for me was that you had to go through those other things, and you had to go work at those part-time jobs, and you had to deal with the hardships and the struggles and the uncomfortable situations you had to deal with. You had to go through that in order to get to a place where you can say, look, I'm not scared anymore. I know God's going to provide for me. I know that I can get through this. And it was only through going through those things and through dealing with that and feeling that discomfort that you were able to like actually get to that point. Um, so I guess where's a question in that? I guess it would just be, what would your advice be to someone who's maybe in a similar position? Who's maybe,
Ooh.
yeah.
my advice to someone who's in a similar situation is just jump into it, just do it, and I feel like that fits this podcast so well because you're all about jumping
Absolutely.
into the uncomfortable and the uncertain. And I'm telling you, like, especially if you're a believer, God will provide for you if you're willing to trust him. And he has shown that to me so many times in so many incredible ways that I didn't expect. I have a church family at the Austin Stone. I'm in a small group there. And in my darkest times, they have seen me and offered me, to buy me groceries, or they've gifted me a gift card to get groceries, or just like paying for a bill that I couldn't afford. And my mentor, Kara, who is my boss at the nonprofit I work for, um, she has just shown me so much grace and support. And, my friends as well, just being so understanding of where I'm at in my life, because I'm about to turn 28 on Saturday. If you would have told me 3 years ago that I would have gone through this journey and been so unsure about my life at this age, I would have never believed you. I've always been someone who thought they always had it figured out, who had an upward path and that wouldn't fall, but the world has a funny way of showing you that things can change very quickly, and it's really up to you to adapt to them or you fall to them. So ultimately, my advice would just be make it work. Just figure out a way to make it work. And if it's not working, just trust that it will and do whatever you possibly can to make it work, because in the end, it will be worth it and you'll be so much happier and so grateful. And like the reward will be so much sweeter.
Yeah. Well, first of all, happy early birthday.
Thank you.
uh, yeah. I think it's really crazy just how much these last 2 years have taught us, like the
It
importance
is.
of adapting, and how, like,
Mm-hmm.
well, first of all, how we were so not prepared just as a
We
world,
weren't.
like to be
Yeah,
able to just like adapt to everything changing in an instant. And it really can all just change. And so that ability to adapt is just so like underrated. And if you can build that skill and if you can nurture that skill, that's something that will take you so much further in life. But just to
exactly.
circle back a little bit, you mentioned Austin Stone. I used to go to Austin Stone for quite a few years when I lived in Austin. Um,
Nice.
and yeah, great church home, great community. Loved it there.
It is.
Um,
Yes.
what has, I guess, been like your experience with how does church play into the rest of your life? If that makes sense.
So back in 2019, I I had a feeling that I needed to go back to church. There were little signs that would pop up here and there that's like, hey, God is calling you. And I sort of ignored it because when I moved back to Austin, I knew I wanted to go back to church, but I didn't know how long I would be here. And I didn't want to be judged by the church. And that's something that every non-believer or faint believer is afraid of, is being judged by the church. And so I wanted to be sure that if I was going back to church, it was a church that I really felt at home in. And one night, one of my friends, his name is Jay, he said to me, we've been talking a lot about like what I've been through and how angry that I sometimes feel and the resentment that I sometimes feel towards my parents and how I find it hard to let go of that. And he said to me, he looked me straight in the eyes and he said, "You should come to church with me on Sunday." And I said, "Okay, I mean, I'll try it, I'll give it a shot, but I just don't know if I'll like it." And so we went to church the following Sunday night. And I remember standing there and just feeling so uncomfortable. It's a new environment. I'm not used to being in that sort of space. So I felt like I stood there very awkwardly during worship, and I would listen to the sermon. And funny enough, the sermon that was on that night was about forgiveness and learning to let go of the anger that you feel and how God has forgiven you, therefore you must forgive others. And I just kept going, even though I felt uncomfortable. And before I knew it, I was going to church by myself every Sunday at 8 a.m. And that's when I really thought to myself, it's time to get connected and it's time to commit to this. So I decided to join a small group at the Austin Stone. And once I got connected with those people and learned more about them, it's impossible to break away from that when you feel so much support from an area that you really thought you would never feel support from. And now every time I try to get people to go to church, I tell them like, look, if I can be accepted, then so can you. It really doesn't matter like what you've been through, because there's some things might not reveal on this podcast, but they're dark, and everyone has their secrets, everyone has their dark times. So one thing that I you have to remember is that God will accept you as you are. You just have to accept and trust that he will save you.
Right. Yeah, I think especially like I think looking on the outside, looking in at this community, it can seem like really uncomfortable. It's really scary and it's
Yes.
really hard to put yourself out there and get involved in that. But very rarely have I ever actually seen an experience where someone does get involved and then regrets it. Um,
Exactly.
Obviously
Exactly.
people are humans. There's, you know, things happen. There's people have bad, many of us, myself included, have bad church experiences in the past.
Exactly.
Churches are run by imperfect people. That's just the reality of it.
Hmm.
Um, but 9 times out of 10, I would say that despite how uncomfortable it is to get yourself in that situation, once you're there and once you're in that community and you're surrounded by those people, it is genuinely life changing. Um,
It is.
so, what would be your advice or your word of, I guess, encouragement to someone who's wanting that community, craving that community, but doesn't really know how to get there, or is maybe struggling with feeling like, you know, scared to jump in?
I think that what definitely got me inside the door is just having friends who are Christian, who are in touch with their faith and very confident in it. It really helps because then you can get, firsthand, or I guess you would call it secondhand, just like knowing what that environment is like before jumping into it. The second thing I would say is, explore your options. There's so many churches in Austin to choose from, and I'm sure everywhere else, other cities as well. There's so many options out there that you can choose a big church or a small church or a medium sized church. It really doesn't matter. It's about finding what works for you. And another thing I would say, which I'm not very good at, is be open to the theology that each church teaches. I'm not saying like, if you're a Christian, venture into Scientology. I'm not saying that whatsoever. What I'm saying is, let's say like I'm a Christian who's looking for a Christian church. Okay, not every Christian church is going to preach the same thing. They don't all believe in the same thing. They interpret the Bible in a different way. So it's important that you're open to, other theologies, but at the same time, diving into the word yourself is what's going to help you decide, what do I believe when I read this? What do I think? What do I feel? And I found that very quickly at the Stone. It was a lot of people say, at least some that I'm close to, who are more of like, they seek conviction at church. I'm more of like, please God, just accept me as I am. I'm
Right.
very sensitive and
Right.
timid. I need you. And don't get me wrong, I love feeling convicted at church because it pushes me to grow. But at the same time, I don't want a preacher to just guilt trip me into loving God.
Right. Yeah, I love that you brought that up actually, because I feel like so when we moved here, we were looking for churches originally, and we went to one church. I won't say the name, but we went to a church, and the pastor in the sermon he was telling some story about his friend who passed away. It was a friend who he had been trying to convert to Christianity for years. He had been trying to minister to this guy, and
Okay.
the guy was like, I forget what he's doing. He's fishing or something, and like fell off the boat and drowned, something like that.
Well,
Tragic. But
yeah.
then the pastor goes on to say that essentially God killed the guy because he didn't believe. And we almost got up and walked out because this was like, whoa. Um, and so, but we kept searching and then we found a church that fit for us. All that to say, that crazy story to say that,
That is an insane
yeah,
story.
just to say, it's an extreme example, but to say that
Yeah.
no church is essentially perfect at its core,
Yeah.
but you gotta like, I don't know. Just basically to affirm what you're saying that like each church has a different theology and different thing they believe. that's
Right.
maybe what they believe. That's fine for them. I don't agree with that. And so that doesn't fit for me, um, and
Exactly.
for us. And so, anyways, that was an extreme example, I know, but that was just to say that, like, yeah, every church says something different. Everybody's going to say something different. And so you got to keep searching until you find like what really fits you, what you believe. And yeah, but anyways, I want to also dive into, so for a lot of Christians, I feel like it's really hard. And I don't know, maybe this goes for other religions too. But I feel like it's hard for a lot of us to like share our faith. And it's a really uncomfortable thing. For whatever reason, I'm not sure why that is, but maybe we just feel like we're going to be looked at a different way, or we're going to be, I think for me, a lot of times, sometimes I feel like I'm going to be perceived as judgmental, because that's sort of a stereotype that's been placed on a lot of believers. Um,
Definitely.
I think some people, I mean, I think also sometimes I don't want to be put in a box. I don't want to be considered like a Christian podcaster or a Christian, you know what I mean? Um,
Right.
and so, but whatever the case may be, why do you think that as Christians, we have a hard time like sharing our faith? Like, why is that so uncomfortable for us?
Well, I would have to say, and we've talked about this many times in our small group, is what I feel like what stops Christians from evangelizing is fear of being haunted. Um, just, I mean, in turn, we could also be judged. You know what I mean? And some people will turn your backs on you because they're not Christian and they feel like you're trying to quote unquote shove your religion down their throat. But I think what people have to realize is there's no other way to spread your faith other than to talk about it and to act it out. If, like, for example, if you, I mean, I have a friend who is not a strong believer. I would say honestly that she's not a believer at all, but she grew up Catholic. And for the past few years, I've been trying to get her to go to church and really consider growing her faith. Um, and she doesn't like to talk about it very often. So it's obviously a very touchy subject for her. And a lot of times, what you'll experience is people will stop talking about it altogether with you. So at that point, it's up to me as a Christian to show you how God's love can change your life. And that can happen through sharing stories or just being a really good friend to someone, and just acting the way God would want you to act, because your job is not to judge people. Your job is to love people no matter what, unconditionally. I mean, of course, there are boundaries to loving people. You can't let them abuse you. But yeah, I think what stops people most of the time from sharing their faith is just fear.
Yeah. How do you think we overcome that fear?
I would say diving into the word, especially with a small group, because you can figure out, not, I don't like to call them strategies, but for lack of a better word, a strategy of how to approach people who are sort of on the fence or unopen, because then you can figure out like, okay, I love this person. What is the best way I can share my faith with them so that they also might find God? Um, because at the end of the day, you're doing it out of love. You're not trying to just grow more believers for the sake of growing believers.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think when we look at it through that lens, it really changes things. And it's not about like, yeah, trying to grow numbers. It's not about trying to get more people in church to have more people in church. It's about trying to get more people in church and to help these people because we genuinely love them, because it's literally a life or death
Exactly.
kind of situation. Um, but yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing on that.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah.
I'd love to switch gears a little bit to back to your podcast. And I know it's on a bit of a hiatus right now. But walk us through that a little bit. I know you touched on it like briefly earlier, but sort of what your podcast is. Yeah.
So my podcast, I had been planning it for a while. I think I started planning it in 2009, in 2018, and then started executing the process in 2019. And then in March 2020, right before the shutdown, we were about to launch, and then things went down. But I've always managed to have really great conversations with everyone around me. And that goes from strangers to people that I love and hold very dear to me. Um, I don't have an issue diving into deep topics ever. I could literally sit at a coffee table at a random place and start a conversation, and an hour into it, we could be talking about trauma. So, and I think that's important. People see vulnerability as a weakness. I see it as a power. The more that you share with someone and the more you're letting them know that they can be vulnerable with you, the stronger your relationship is going to get. And I grew up in a broken household. So, I mean, I do have both my parents, but they are divorced and they've been divorced for a long time now. And their communication as a kid was not good. My parents have both been in abusive relationships outside of each other. And seeing that growing up, I always knew that I wanted to have better communication skills so that I can avoid that as an adult. And I wanted to be sure 100% that I could break that cycle. And it's definitely something I'm still working on. I mean, I'm human, I have my parents in my personality. So it can be hard, but that's the reason I started it. And uh, the whole thing was that I was going to interview people and break down their communication skills and how they handle conflict. But as time went on, especially with the pandemic, it became really hard to interview people, and I didn't want to do it through Zoom, even though it's highly effective now. I didn't want to do it through Zoom at the time, and so I feel like I kind of lost myself in the process. I started interviewing entrepreneurs and people I've worked with about random topics, and I mean, don't get me wrong, we have a lot of great conversations that are out right now, but there came a point where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't like the product that I've been putting out. So I have been, well, I was putting out episodes called the off season show, part of the podcast. And basically, what I would do is I would just stand in my room by myself and talk. If I felt angry, I would just talk. If I was sad, I would just talk. And a lot of people liked that. So as time went on and I was thinking to myself, it was literally 3 in the morning one night. I was thinking to myself, how can I make this a concept that is consistent and, really holds true to this vulnerability um, aspect where I want people to share and grow better relationships. I have thought of it, but I won't mention it on the podcast because I don't want anyone to like take the concept before I can execute it. Not that, not that I think your listeners shouldn't do it if they have something in mind, but it's like I should keep this to myself for now.
Right. No, you're good.
Um, so basically, I'll give you the gist of it is I will be interviewing people to just tell how they've gotten through some of their most vulnerable moments with others. And that's about that's about as good as it gets as far as I can explain right now. But yeah, and I've always been very passionate about communication. I have a communication degree. Um, like I mentioned before, I'm a relationship builder, so I just love talking to people and getting more people to understand that vulnerability is a huge advantage. So
Wow. I love that. Um, let's
thank
actually
you.
dive more into vulnerability. How do you think we become more vulnerable, like as people?
It's hard, I will tell you that. But I feel like one of the things that really pushes someone to be vulnerable is going through a traumatic experience that they never thought they would go through. Because then you realize, if this can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. And if it can happen to anyone, then the chances are I've met people who have gone through the same thing, and maybe I should be more comfortable sharing that. And once you do share that and people are receptive to it, it's a feeling that you can't really explain, but the experience of it is just very freeing.
Right. Yeah. No, totally. How have you gone about like becoming more open and vulnerable? Like, what are some of the steps you've taken, if you're comfortable sharing?
I've always been an open book.
Yeah.
I've always been an open book. And I feel like at times I definitely overshare. Like I have listened to a few recent episodes that I put out this summer about what I went through as far as my dating life. And I realizing like, oh my gosh, what if these people were listening to this and now they know that I talked about them on the podcast and now it's embarrassing. Like maybe this is why they ghosted me. But, you know, the right people will listen to you. and the wrong people they're not gonna like you no matter what. So why care, you know? And so the steps that I take, or at least the steps that I would recommend others take, is just start within your closest circle. Tell people things that you didn't really feel comfortable telling them. I mean, don't just burst out with it, but be like, hey, I really want to like have a coffee with you. Can we talk about life and just see where it goes? Because you want to think that you can present yourself in this perfect way and that other people have it together because of what you see on social media, but that's not the truth. Like some of the most depressed people have a really awesome Instagram, you know? And so you just have to remember that when you want to be vulnerable is yes, you're putting yourself out there for rejection and judgment, but the people who will stick by you, that's who you do it for, and it's worth it.
Right. Absolutely. Have you ever dealt with, this is going to be kind of a vulnerable question, but have you ever dealt with maybe an experience where you shared something vulnerable with someone and it didn't pan out quite like you thought?
Oh, definitely. I can't point to a specific time, but um, I mean, there have been plenty of, first dates, second dates where I've shared maybe a little bit more than they were ready for, and they kind of just shut down and they're like, whoa, I wasn't ready for this conversation. Like, hey, but again, that could be on me. Like, I need to find the right time to be vulnerable. And it can be tough when someone doesn't receive your information with the empathy that you're looking for or the sympathy you're looking for. Um, but you just have to take it, like, just get over it.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but get over it. Then they're just not your people. Simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you can look at it with that mindset, and if you can look at it through the lens of like, well, now I just know that person's not for me. And I don't have to, I mean, I hate to put it this way, but I don't really, for lack of better words, like waste my time on that person. Um,
Right.
you're
Exactly.
weeding out the people who you don't connect with, and that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that at the end of the day. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, but
Because I feel like if, like, let's say that I share something vulnerable with
mhm,
you and you're not receptive to it, but I still choose to hang around you, even though we have never gone beyond surface level. What value are you really bringing to
yeah,
my life?
right,
You know? So that's a good way to look at
yeah.
it.
And I mean, I think if we're hanging around, like if all the people we surround ourselves with are like that, to where it's like we're not really bringing each other anything. We're just like here for this. It's like like people who stay in relationships just because they don't want to be alone. It's kind of the same concept
Yeah.
of just, yeah,
Yes.
of just that, like, you're holding yourself back from what could actually be out there. Like, you could have something so much better out there, so much more fulfillment out there, but instead it's staying with what's comfortable and
Yes.
what feels, what's secure, what's right there, instead of getting out into the uncomfortable and getting what could be so much better and bring you so much more fulfillment
Yeah.
and happiness and whatnot. But um,
Get out into the uncomfortable.
exactly, right on. um, your nonprofit you're doing or that you're working for. Can you tell us about that a little bit? Like what?
Absolutely. I absolutely love this nonprofit. Another funny story. I feel like I just have a ton of funny stories. So, um, during my layoff, I was very vulnerable on LinkedIn. Therefore, I was getting a lot of views. People loved what I was posting because I wasn't just posting the high points. I was really talking about how rough it was to be in a pandemic, seeing all of your friends get either rehired or get great jobs that they've been looking at and just get absolutely nothing on my plate, you know? And so I was very open with that because a lot of people are going through the same thing. And I thought, there are other people that need to hear this message. They need to know that it'll be okay. So I was posting on LinkedIn. This woman named Kara, absolutely love her. She's amazing. She connected with me and sent me an email and said, hey, I have this project that I really think that you would be great at. I love your vulnerability on LinkedIn. And I believe that you can bring that into this project and really do amazing work. She also attached her resume, which most, like, employers do not do. So I absolutely respected her for that because for her to show me her entire work history, that's vulnerable, you know? So we got on a phone call on Google Meet, and she introduced herself, and we hit it off really well, and it started off as a 3-month contract. It has now been a year and a half
Oh,
almost that I've been working for her.
that's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's been
That's
great.
awesome.
So the nonprofit is called Family House in San Francisco. And what they do is provide free housing and meals and activities to kids who have terminal illnesses, so their parents and sisters and brothers can stay there with them for free. They are at limited capacity right now because of the pandemic, so they're trying to keep it as low as they possibly can without shooing anybody away. um, so what's amazing about this nonprofit is, first of all, every single thing is free. Every single thing. They get free meals every night, they get free housing, they get diapers, anything they could possibly need. And I just find that so selfless. And I really do believe that God pointed me in the direction of this project, because don't I will have to tell you transparently, I absolutely am so tired of doing social media as a job. But when it comes to Family House, I would do it for the rest of my life, you know, because it's a project I'm passionate about. I'm not selling something I don't believe in, and I'm actually making a difference in these kids' lives. So that's what I love about it. And they're so well known in San Francisco that they have all these fundraisers that do big numbers. And it's just amazing to see the community come together for them.
Wow, that's incredible. I love what you said about how like you're so sick of doing social media work, but how now doing it for something you're passionate about is something that just comes easy to you and it comes natural to you. And I feel that a lot myself, just through doing a lot of the stuff I've been doing before in the past, 2 years or so. I feel like it hasn't come as easy and it's been a struggle and I've just been feeling really burnt out. And then over the last 2 months, as I've really been ramping up into the uncomfortable again and then starting this podcast and having conversations like this, I love it. Like, I don't care like that I have to work a part-time job to make ends meet because this isn't, making me money right now.
Yep,
I don't care because I love doing this and this hypes me up. And this is what like really
exactly.
keeps me going. I could have been making way like double what I was doing before, but this is so much more enjoyable for me and I'm able to have these conversations and do this kind of
Yeah.
stuff because of that. All that's to say, like, what's your advice to someone when they're trying to find something new or start something new? Um, how do you find that like passion? Like, how do you find that spark in you?
I think it's important to pay attention to the way you feel when you're in certain spaces. Like, I didn't mention this earlier, but I also worked part time at Stout House Coffee. I actually got the coffee shop from you from a story that you posted about coffee
Really?
shops in Austin.
I love
And
Star House.
yeah, yeah. And the owners, yes, shout out to
Yes.
Stout House. I love them. So, um, in November, I actually walked up to them and I said, "Hey, are you hiring? Because I love hanging out here. I might as well work here, and I need more money." Sandy and James are the owners, and they're just the sweetest, some of the sweetest people in the world. And they've been so supportive as I got my real estate license. But back to your question, um, I would say to someone that's like looking for something new, start with what you already like. What do you like to do? What would you be okay with doing for 5 to 8 hours a day by yourself? You know, figure that out first, and then you can find professions that fit that. Because what I realized is I don't like being behind a screen all day by myself. It was different whenever I worked for a marketing agency and we were in person and I had people to roll over to their cubicles and talk and go to lunch with. But once the world went fully remote, I realized that it wasn't the work I was passionate about, it was the people. It was being face to face, helping people and, allowing people to achieve their goals, and me being there to help. So, and that's when I realized, especially while I was working at Rowing Dock and Stout House, is I love customer service. It was just a matter of finding the right customer service job. So I would definitely, start with your passions, start with what makes you happy on a daily basis, go from
Wow,
there.
that was good. A lot of value in what you just said. Um, I definitely feel that like I relate to that a lot. Just going back to what I was just saying a minute ago, like I kept every few months I just felt so burnt out and so frustrated, and I would just be talking to people around me, and I'd just be like, I don't know what to do. Like, is this not the right path for me? Am I not doing the right thing? Meanwhile, I've had Into the Uncomfortable on the back burner this whole time, sitting there. And then I just kind of like one
Yep.
day, I guess it just sort of clicked with me. I was like, what do I like to do? What comes naturally to me? I love writing. I love talking to people and connecting with
Yes.
people. I love being able to spread this message and help encourage other people. That's what I'm like really passionate about. And I think the thing I love the most about it is it doesn't put me in any sort of a box. I can kind of be whatever I want to be with it. If I want to be a designer, I can be a designer through
Yeah.
it. If I want to be a podcaster, I can be a podcaster. And I love the whole concept of not being able to be put in a box. And that's
Yeah.
essentially just, I don't know, just to tie that all together. Um, yeah, that was sort of when I realized like I have this thing. Like maybe it's not going to make me money full time right now, but that's fine because what's more important, like making a bunch of money or actually doing what fills me up, because that's what's going to help me keep going.
Exactly.
Um, but
Exactly. And you know, they say what you reap what
yes,
you sow. And when I accepted that second marketing job while I was laid off that I ended up hating, they offered me a lot of money, a lot of money that I've wanted for a long time. And I knew when I accepted it, I was like, I'm going to hate doing this every day. I'm going to absolutely hate being at my desk and dealing with this. But the money is the only thing I saw. And one thing that people tend to take for granted is that money is not everything. You could have that salary that you've been looking forward to for years. You can buy that car you've been wanting. But at the end of the day, if you're unhappy leaving work every day, is that money worth it? Because to me, it's not. I'd rather be broke and happy than rich and poor. I mean, rich
I got you.
rich
I
and
got you.
unhappy.
I know what you meant. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like the saying like, what good is it to gain the whole world but lose your soul? And I mean, life is so short.
Exactly.
Like it's literally here and gone like that. And if you're spending the whole time chasing money, something that's, I mean, when you die, what good is that money? You know? And
Right.
to spend your whole life chasing that, but not actually living a fulfilled life and not actually being happy and actually enjoying life and making an impact, what's the point? Like, what is the point in any of that?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I've noticed too that I've sort of found is like the people who are, doing well financially for themselves and that are actually also happy is the people that just went for it and like chased their passion because like
Yeah.
that's going to attract so much more. That's like that, what do people call it? The abundance mindset of just like having this mindset of like we were saying earlier, like God will provide. Like I'm gonna like chase. Like I have this calling in me. I know that I'm gonna nurture that and chase that, and then I'm just gonna trust that God will provide, and I'll do what I have to in the meantime. I'll work at the coffee shop. I'll take the part-time job, whatever. I know this is what I have to do, and I'm gonna go for it. And I think when we can step
Mhm.
into that and like fully embrace that, no matter how uncomfortable it may feel and how scary it may be, that's how we live that fulfilled life. And that's how we really step into who we were made to be. Um, but I love how much
Exactly.
you've like tied community into this too, because I think that's such an essential element. Because like
It is.
if
Definitely.
we don't have those people surrounding us and helping us, it's going to be not just a lonely ride, but it's going to be much harder to get to where we want to be. Um,
It is so
how
much
has
harder. Yeah.
like, I mean, we've talked a lot about how communities played a role in this for you. How has it played a role in terms of maybe like accountability? How have you, does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. I am a huge, okay, let me see how I can put this. I believe when it comes to being accountable, my friends have really helped in a way that they've told me, hey, it's all right. Like one of my huge worries when I decided to take part-time jobs as a 27-year-old was that I'd be judged for it. I can't even tell you how many people showed up in my DMs being like, "I'm so happy that you decided to do this. This makes me want to quit my job and do something else." And once I told people that, it was like, okay, now I have the motivation to make sure that I can succeed at this so that people can see when they take a chance on themselves, they can have whatever they want. And, when I was getting my real estate license, I didn't really tell that many people. I only told like my closest friends and family. And that also held me accountable because my closest people were counting on me to make my goals happen. And once you tell people that you care about that you're doing something, you don't want to disappoint them. Ultimately it's you that has to live with your decisions. And yes, you could quit something if you figure out you don't like it, but if you're passionate about something and you're going for something and then you tell your friends and then later on you're just like, yeah, I decided to give it up. You know what they're going to think? They're going to be like, why would you do that? Like we were rooting for you. We really believed in you. And then you lose your credibility as like someone that is a go-getter and that really believes that if you want something you can have it. Because now what? You're going to preach to them that they can have whatever they want whenever you just gave
Right.
up on your dreams.
Right.
You can't do that.
I think that's one of the things I love the most actually about this platform is that I'm saying all this stuff, but if I'm not backing it up, then I'm just a fraud. And so it forces me, it
Exactly.
gives me that accountability through putting stuff out there, through having these conversations. It gives me that accountability to make sure I'm living in an uncomfortable life and that I'm pushing myself. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, there's one of my biggest pet peeves is just like fake people and people who don't practice what they
Yeah.
preach, so to speak. Um, but
Mhm.
how do you think that, let me see how to word this question. How do you think we become like our most like authentic, genuine selves?
Well, I honestly think it starts with being honest with yourself. You have to be able to look in the mirror and say, I don't like these things about myself, or these are the ways that I can improve. And then you have to actively say to yourself, I want to work to improve them. And it's, I'm sorry, can you re ask the question? Because I
No,
lost
you're
my train
good.
of thought right in the middle of my answer.
Basically, see if I can remember it. Basically said like, how do you think we become like our most genuine and true selves? Like, how do we stay true to that? Like who we are?
Oh, yeah. So, in addition to, just being honest with yourself, be honest with others. I mean, you really just have to have full vulnerability, transparency with yourself and others. And I'm not saying just go out into the world and
Right.
start screaming your flaws at people and, things like that, but just pay attention to the way you feel, pay attention to your thoughts and address them. Don't just bottle things up and just let it go because that's not going to do anything for you. You're just staying in the exact same spot. And so it's important that like you say no to things that don't fit what you're going for. Say no to happy hours if you're not feeling up to it. The fear of missing out will pass and you're going to thank yourself later for doing what you need to do. Um, and, specifically with jobs, especially, say no to the ones that don't give you the motivation to get up in the morning. I get up in the morning now because I like what I do and I don't hate what I like. I don't hate the people that I'm talking to. I love the people that I work with. And I believe in the cause. So, in order to really live authentically, you have to be true to yourself and your values. And it starts with figuring
Right.
out what those
How do
are.
you think we do that? How do we like find what our values are? I know that's kind of like a tough question, but like,
it's it can be tough, especially for people that really might feel lost in themselves.
it's like really, it kind of starts with like, sorry, go
A
ahead.
good way to No, it's okay. Uh, Another way, I think a good way to gauge it is who are you surrounding yourself with? Are you surrounding yourself with people who are motivated, passionate, authentic, genuine, caring people? Or are you surrounding yourself with people who just want to go out whenever they possibly can, skip work whenever they possibly can, who tell you lies or bail on you or flake on you all the time, who aren't close with their family or don't even, now full disclosure, like anyone can have a complicated relationship with their family, but at the end of the day, it's important that like the people around you are genuine. And I understand that it can be hard to identify genuine characteristics in people, but that only comes with experience. And that goes back to being vulnerable. You have to be able to put yourself out there if you want people to put themselves out there for you. And so in all areas of life, just becoming self-aware, which, I guess requires practice and even reading certain books, but start with yourself, take a look around you, figure out what you want to be, and then figure out how
Mm,
to get there, which
okay.
I don't have all the answers,
Well,
but
I love that. Yeah, I mean, that's actually what I was going to say is like self-awareness, I think is such a key role in that. Um, and I think, honestly, I think
it
one way
is.
you build that self-awareness is just by actually taking the time to listen to yourself. There's so much like distraction and so much busyness. And even
Mhm.
when we're not doing anything, like how often are we just like then just like finding ways to fill that time with like scrolling social media or just keeping ourselves busy. And we don't take that
Exactly.
time to really like listen to ourselves. And maybe we don't want to hear what we have to say.
Exactly.
And that's fair because it's uncomfortable, but it's so important. And building that self awareness, I think, is just such a key piece in being a genuine person and being authentic. But it has so many other benefits of just being knowing how I feel. I mean, that's how we achieve that fulfillment is knowing, being in tune with ourselves. Um, but also, like you said, you are who you hang with, who you surround yourself, and the people that are around you
Hmm.
is so important. And you really begin
It
to pick
is.
up the attributes and the values of the people around you. And if you're hanging around just genuine people and you're hanging around people who, I mean, and even on a different level, people who aren't motivated, people who are settling and not trying to step into the uncomfortable and not trying to go for their dreams and live to the fullness of life. If you're hanging around people like that and surrounding yourself with people like that, then you're going to become like that. So, yeah,
Exactly. You are the average of the closest five people you
yes,
let hang around you all the time. That's not the exact
it's
quote, but it's
close.
something
It's
similar.
close.
Yes.
Close enough. Absolutely. Um, how do you think people, just in a general sense, we talked about this kind of with church earlier, but like in a general sense, how do you think people should go about finding community? Like people who are looking for community, just generally speaking.
See, this is hard because I have always been the floater friend. So what I define that as is I've
Hmm.
never really had a group. Granted, in college it was so much easier to find a group of people you can hang around all the time. But as an adult, I feel like I'm the floater friend who's never really been part of a group, but is more so just like kind of just drifting here and there. And it's hard to find community because I really do want to find that again, that a group that I can hang around all the time. But I'm 28 years old, and that is hard to find when everyone's getting married and having kids and buying houses and starting new jobs. So I think my best recommendation for finding community is at work, join some fitness groups, take some classes, like jump into stuff that you love doing, and the people will come. They always follow. And I think, like, for example, one of my college roommates, who's also one of my very best friends, she started taking a pottery class and she's finding community there. So I think in order to find community, just jump into stuff that you love doing and don't be afraid to meet new
Right.
people and open up to
Right.
them.
It's definitely hard. It's definitely uncomfortable putting yourself out there, um, especially if you're like an
It
introvert
is.
like myself. Um, Definitely understand that struggle,
Yeah,
but it's 100% worth it at the end of the day. Um, but
it is.
yeah, my, I guess, biggest takeaway from all of this is just how important community is and how,
Hmm.
yeah, just how much of a role that really plays on our lives, and how we need it really. Um,
We do. We
but
do need it.
yeah, anyways, that's about it. So just a couple questions to wrap up here. Um, are you like you're currently taking clients, I'm assuming?
I am not taking any marketing clients, but I am taking apartment clients. So if you're looking for an apartment, you can find me on Instagram, or you could email me, and then we can figure something out. Do you want me to share like where exactly they can find me?
Yeah, for
Yeah, for
sure. I
sure.
mean,
I mean,
I'll
I'll
link it in
link it
the
in the
show
show
notes as
notes as
well,
well,
but
but
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, perfect. So on Instagram, I started a an apartment locator page. It's called Search with Kalie. It's just search with KALIE underscore. I'm not too active on it right now because I'm still getting my bearings in at this job, but you could also follow me on Instagram under my personal page. It's Kalie Souknary. So that's KALIE SOUKN as in Nancy ARY. And it's pretty simple. I'm the only Kalie Souknary out there, so it'll be easy to find me.
Nice.
If you want to email me about apartments, you can go to ksouknary@smartcitylocating.com. And I'm always happy to help. We're jumping into a huge busy season. So if you're moving soon, it's best to get started now.
Awesome. And you're just in Austin, correct?
Yeah, I'm only in the Austin market, but if you need an apartment, I could always send a referral to one of the agents in a different city too. So
Awesome. Sweet. What's kind of like on the radar for you coming up? Like, what are some things maybe you're looking forward to, excited about, working on, whatever the case may be?
I cannot wait until I can jump back into the podcast because I'm telling you, like, you and I need to have a talk about what I'm gonna do sometime. I don't have any more time today, but we need to have a talk at some time about what I'm doing because I'm super excited about the concept. Now that I've, been podcasting and I know what it takes to run a show, because the first time I think I highly underestimated it. Then I feel like I can put out a product that I can really be proud of. So I'm hoping to jump back into that in the next 6 to 9 months because I'm so excited. Other than that, my goal, I'm putting it into existence now. My goal is to make six figures in my first full year at this job. So I just want to be as focused and driven as possible because it's been a long road to get here. And I deserve to give myself the attention that it needs.
Absolutely.
So that's pretty much what's on my radar. Other than that, just living life and maybe hopefully travel some more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. Rooting for you, excited for you.
Thanks.
Um, I like to leave people kind of within. I'm big about like taking actionable steps, like giving people the tools, I guess, to take that step. So, not to put you too much on the spot here, but essentially, like for you, over the next, say, week or so, what is one thing you're going to do to push yourself into the uncomfortable? You can take a second if you need it.
Over the next week or so, because I did just make my first sale last week, and I
Yeah.
I know that this is work focused again, but
No, you're good.
my goal is to make three more sales within the next week, and the way I plan to do that is just leads, take so many leads, more than I can handle, because then I'll learn like what's my limit, how much can I handle at once, and it can be scary, but I have great leaders here, and I'm confident. And I've lived in Austin for 4 years now, so I know the market somewhat well. And I mean, there's a ton of apartments around Austin now, so I don't know the market like I should know the market yet, but I will. And it's uncomfortable, but like we said, with the help of community and trust in
Yes.
God,
Yes.
amazing things are able to happen.
Awesome. Well, like I said, rooting for you, excited for you.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming on and talking to me. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad we could finally do
yeah,
this.
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, but yeah, thank you. Definitely, like I said, one of my biggest takeaways was just community and the importance of community. And yeah, not being afraid to like put yourself out there, not being afraid to do what it takes to get to where you want to be and not just settling um, for less. But yeah, thank you so much again. Appreciate you big time. Um, and yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. Go hit up Kalie. Sorry, Kalie. My bad. Go hit up Kalie. Go show her some love. Go stay tuned for when her podcast comes back. I can't wait to see what you've got brewing there. And if you're in need of an apartment in the Austin, Texas area, absolutely hit her up.
Yes,
Thank
please.
you guys so much for tuning in. Any closing words?
No, I just am super appreciative that I got to talk about this with you. It's been really
Yeah.
great. I wasn't expecting it to go this well, to be honest with you, but it's really been awesome. You're a great interviewer and you're doing
Well, thank
amazing.
you.
I'm really
Well,
proud of
thank you.
you.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Yeah, we definitely took this conversation in some directions I didn't expect, but I'm glad for it. I'm
Me
appreciative.
too.
I love it. I love the way it worked out.
Me too.
But yeah, anyways, thank you so much again for joining us. See you on the next one. What's up, guys? Jake here again. Just wanted to thank you real quick for listening to this episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I ask that you would please go leave us a rating or review wherever you're listening to this. Really helps us out, really helps us tell more people about the uncomfortable and to help more people live fulfilled lives. So if you could go take 2 seconds to go do that, that would mean the world. Now go take one actionable step towards your dreams today and to apply what you heard here on this episode. You got this. I'm rooting for you as always. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Uncomfortable Podcast.
Take yourself out your comfort zone. If you want to be ordinary, you ain't even got to listen to me.
Comfort is overrated. We've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.